Hi everybody and welcome to the webinar. Tonight we are doing Designing from the Inside Out with Marc Rettig, who is a DSI faculty member as well as the founder of Fit Associates. Marc has an immense background in research, cultural immersion, ethnographic research, facilitation, co-design, and communication design. You can read more about his amazing background on our website at dsi.sva.edu. But a little bit more about tonight's webinar. You can hash about this event using the hashtag DesignWith. You can mention Marc at mrettig, or you can mention SVADSI at SVADSI. This is part of a series of webinars that we have going, so if you'd like to see any of the past webinars, they are on our website, and we'll have another webinar on March 6th, which has all to do with getting a job in design. I hope you will join us then, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Marc. So here we go, Marc.
Hello. I think I have unmuted my microphone. I think you should be able to hear me. So say something to us if you can't hear me. Welcome everybody. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm excited to spend some time talking about this stuff. I'll spend 45 minutes somewhere in there presenting, and then we'll have time for discussion, question and answer afterwards. And we'll just get started. These are some of the things that Aaron just mentioned, and let's see if I can drive this tool. This is the title of the talk. I'm Marc Rettig, as I just said. Here's the hashtag for the talk for you tweeters. And this is my contact information. You know, I welcome emails about this, and that's my Twitter handle. The website, a lot of people say this, I know, does really describes our past more than it describes what we're up to now. But this is a really important conversation for me and for the people I'm working with. So email is welcome, and I'll show this stuff again at the end. Now, the program that's our host is the Masters in Design for Social Innovation. And I'm on the faculty, and over the spring and summer I'll be creating a course which on the website is called Introduction to Design for Social Innovation, and I'm really kind of casting it more as fundamentals of design for social innovation, which has put me face to face with the question, what is that? What's design for social innovation? It feels like a name for something that's going on, and we don't really have a name for it yet. So we've got these familiar design, we know innovation, social innovation, but what is it really, and how do you do it, and what are the fundamentals, and what should be taught? And that's where I'm coming from in pulling together this material, plus my own work is moving more and more into this direction. So I want to know how to equip myself and equip teams to do the kind of work that we're going to be talking about tonight. So here's the kind of the summary of the talk. Whatever you choose to call it, I don't know the background, you know, how many of you are from the design professions or you're already doing some kind of social work. But if you come from the usual business professions, design for social innovation is not like the work you've already been doing, not like the work you're used to. We're used to materials that are physical or digital. But these materials are social. These materials are relationships and people's emotions and identity in their inside. So we need new tools and methods on top of the ones we've already got. The good news is I just heard a talk by Peter Senge, and he was saying, yeah, there's a lot of trouble in the world, but what needs to happen is already happening. It's a very hopeful sentence. And if we're getting ready to do this kind of work, the tools we need are already out there being developed. And there's things out there for us to collect and harvest and learn from. And those tools that we'll be talking about tonight involve authentic dialogue and transformational experiences. And they can only be employed from inside the situation, as opposed to what we're used to, showing up as experts from outside the situation. So that's the big picture. Now let's dive in. This talk comes in two parts. Part one, something's emerging. Something is happening out there. Let's talk about what it is. And part two is that one thing that we can get from what's happening out there is tools for engaging with the real complexity of life, not a simplified view of the complexity of life. So let's dive into part one. Picture this situation. Bertie County, North Carolina. It's a county in the state of in the eastern United States. 1 in 3 of its children live in poverty. There's buildings that nobody's using more than there's buildings that people are using. The education levels are low, and these things are being passed from generation to generation. Now, you know, social innovator, design for social innovation class, how do you tackle a situation like that? What do you do? Where do you start? What would you make? If you've been following these topics for a while, you probably are aware of Project H. They've gotten a lot of buzz. They've been in the New York Times. Emily Pilliton, one of the founders, has given a really nice TED Talk. So here's their two of their URLs. Project H is their design firm, and Studio H is their work in Bertie County. And from the TED Talk, just go to TED.com and search for Pilliton and you'll find her. This is a grab of one of her slides. When they started that firm, before they got involved with Bertie County, they grew their business, built their business around these 5 principles. And I'm not going to talk about them all, but 2 of them, a couple of them are really important for what we're talking about tonight. One is design with, not for, and the other is design systems, not stuff. Let's see what that looked like, how they approached Bertie County. They were invited in by a new principal of the school. And they got there and, you know, as they came to understand the situation, they go like, this community, if we're going to bring the potential that we carry with us, this potential as designers, and we're going to bring it to this community, where do we go? And they saw that the school was the heart of the community, that really is what a lot of life revolved around the activities in the school. So they thought, well, let's bring design inside the school. So if we're going to go inside the community, we have to go inside the school. And they actually took the year that they needed to become qualified as high school teachers. And here's Emily's quote: "It's not about designing for clients anymore. It's about designing with people and letting appropriate solutions emerge from within." That's an example. You know, it's already happening. People are making the tools for us to learn from. So what they did was they made a kind of glorified shop class in the high school. So here's some kids, you know, making something that they've designed, and they've designed together, and they conceived the idea for it. They looked at the community, asked what would help here. Let's design something, let's make it. And one of the things they made was a market. This is a picture of this beautiful market they made for the town, the sort of the one big town in the county, where people can come and sell their goods, people can buy from each other, people can meet, people come from further than just the town, and here it is in use. And this was written up in the Times. One of the students said at the opening of this thing, "It changed the way I see the world and made me expect more of myself." They've done a number of projects, making chicken coops, making all kinds of things. So I want to kind of step back and reflect on this. They worked with students. And is that social innovation, or is that running a class? Well, the social innovation happened mostly indirectly because the students have relationships with their families. and the families have relationships with each other. And those things are enriched by what happens at the market or with the chicken coops or the interaction with the school. And the school staff, it's not just Project H, it's the rest of the staff in the school that is kind of caught up in this and part of it and see what's going on. It affects the school, and it affects the project that Emily and Matthew themselves by working with his students. They themselves are changed and they learn. So these ripple effects just keep spreading. The social innovation is the result of influence moving out through all these relationships. So now it's the county, it's us talking tonight about design for social innovation. We're being influenced by their work because they told the story, and this can ripple all the way out to policy, to how you and I and this SVA program approaches social design and development, funding for education, tremendous ripple effects. So I love their example. Let's, well, that's right. I wanted to also add, it's not just that what people do or maybe what people understand propagates out through this county. It's deeper than that. It's also, I mean, think about that boy's quote. It changed what I expect of myself, and it changed how I see my place in the world. So that's right down in his identity and his sense of connection to the world and his sense of whether he is enough to affect the situation around him. And I mean, it can be a shift from I'm not good enough to I have power to affect change in the world. So it's profound what's happening. So I think it's a powerful example for us. Let's look at one more situation, and we'll start teasing out some lessons. Let's say that you're asked, the government of Vietnam calls, and you're asked to create an effective long-term solution for child malnutrition in the villages of Vietnam, a place where more than half the children in rural villages suffer from malnutrition. And the government's been working on it, but when the government program may work, but when the government agents leave the villages, it stops working. It doesn't catch on. It's not sustainable. So your job is to do something that works, come up with something that works, and that is sustainable, that changes actually the culture of nutrition in the villages. So, design for social innovation people, how do you tackle a situation like that? There's a great site, positivedeviance.org, this Positive Deviance Initiative, and it's amazing the range of situations and the range of contexts that they've applied this method to. Positive Deviance is named after a method, an approach to this kind of work where there's always some outliers in any bell curve. There's, in any situation where most people are not doing so well, there's going to be a few that are doing better. And those are the positive deviants. And what those folks did in this situation, so this is my rephrasing of their method and how they applied it in Vietnam. So go inside the situation. Don't stand back at a distance. Go inside and see what's going on. So they basically what they did is they went into these villages that had a high rate of malnutrition, and they asked, are there any people just as poor as you whose children are healthier than all the other children? So they're same conditions, but more health. And the answer was, well, yeah, there are a few of those families. So they found those families, those poor families with healthier children, and you go see what they're doing differently. And what they were doing was they were feeding their children a little bit different stuff. They found some sources that other people weren't tapping into. They were more hands-on about the feeding. The hygiene was different. Everybody was washing their hands. Well, that had been going on all this time, but it hadn't spread through the rest of the community. Why? That became the next design challenge. If we've come to, we think we've found something that would help, but how do we get this to propagate through the culture? It's a social innovation problem, not a thing innovation problem. And for them, it became pretty clear that they needed to not just tell people about this, they need to do it with them so that they felt what it was like and, saw it happen in their own home with their own kids. So they worked with some of the mothers to do cooking classes, to go into other families' homes and show them. They should actually go through a whole meal with them. And then eventually some of those mothers went out into the other villages themselves. And so we had a teach the teachers thing. And then they measured. They tracked, did it work? And they kept it up. And here's the results. After the 2-year pilot project, malnutrition had decreased by 85% in the pilot villages. And then over the next year, it spread all the way across Vietnam and had just a tremendous effect. So if we look at this in kind of the same way that we did Project H, they were very deliberate about this attempt to spread the positive change through the relationships that already existed and maybe to help form some new ones. These few healthy families affected the other families in those villages, and some of those mothers took on a new role that they really didn't have before, and that spread out to the whole country and affected cultural conventions for feeding children, and it was deep. They moved from just doing what they'd always done to adopting and teaching each other, adopting this new way and teaching each other. But it goes all the way down to what seemed hopeless, just a fact of life, that if you were born in this village, you didn't eat so well. If you were a mother in this village, your children would be malnourished and subject to disease. It shifted from that to, hey, we can do this for ourselves. We don't need the government agent to be here to make things better. We can just, this is part of who we are, that we can make this better. So again, profound effects, really something to learn here. So these are 2 stories out of, we could talk for days over stories like this. There's a lot out there on the web and in books, similar stories. Something new, a new way of seeing these kinds of situations, and a new way of creating inside these situations is happening. And it's happening, it's coming from a lot of different sources. There's Project H as an example of people thoroughly in the practice of design who are contributing to this new way of seeing and creating. But there's people in development agencies, there's people out there facilitating in situations of conflict, or some really tough political situations, all who are contributing components of this new way of working. It's, for me, very exciting. Something really important's going on. So that's part 1. Something's emerging. Let's talk about what we can actually learn from that and in hope of actually creating a practice of design for social innovation, the way we have a practice of design for things or for software. What are the tools for working inside the real complexity of social situations? Those couple of situations I mentioned, of course, they share the characteristic, they both have poverty in them. But all kinds of situations, I mean, it could be, there's a list here, a corporate culture that's needing some change, somebody starting a business with explicit intention of social outcomes, the local food system wherever you live, a school district, a 3rd grade class, I mean, all of those things, if you go into them and really look at what's going on, it can be overwhelming. Because the dynamic and the number of personalities, and it just doesn't feel as easy as making a new website. But there's some helpful things to know about that complexity. So let's look at the complexity, understand something about it, and that'll teach us something about what our the materials are that we need to work with and what tools we can use to really get something done. Well, let me back up as contrast. So we all come, I don't know if we all come from this, but I think I'm stereotyping my audience, because for me, I come from a world where we were trained, and most of our career has been in making things, and I include software and even services, business outcomes in things. And the picture has been that so there's some person, some individual person out there, and we might call them a customer or a consumer, whatever. And then there's us. There's the people and the institution we work with or the business we work with. And it's our job to figure out what the thing is that we can give or sell to these people. And that sets up a situation where it's us, we're the experts, we know how, and then there's the them, those are the people that we are serving or selling to, or we're connected with through the thing, the fix. You've all heard the phrase, let's go discover unmet needs. What do they need? What's broken? How can we fix it? How can we make it better? And this is most of the business world. This is most of design practice, us fixing it for them. And I think I sound kind of cynical. I am a little bit cynical about this. This is a perfectly good model for some activities, but I think it's not the model that we want to bring to something like design for social innovation. Because when you go out on the street, that us, them, let's make a thing for them starts to look kind of ridiculous. And you just look at the dancing, jumping, messy complexity of real life. Something showing up in a box just starts to seem kind of inadequate. Real life situations have these characteristics. There's a lot of text on this slide, but I think it's important just to kind of, we're not used to facing this. We're used to drawing boxes and arrows. So let's take a little time to just talk about this complexity, because it might sound intimidating, but let's live with that discomfort. And let's see if we, for me, it's a quality of a good tool, a tool I can really use in a situation. If I can feel the discomfort of like really looking at the real complexity of life and say, if I bring this along with me, I think I can do something. I think I can at least start. They're organically complex. Even if you can draw the picture of it, of these interlocking relationships, it's wiggling all the time. It's changing all the time. Stuff is flowing across these relationships. They're not just simple lines. And structures form out of these relationships, and processes operate on those structures. And they're not well understood by anybody. The people living inside them all see it from their own point of view. And that leads to a lack of consensus about what might happen that would be better, because people's view of what would be better is skewed by their perspective. But in any case, it's unlikely that what's better will be just a thing, or just a new product or service. The better situation is going to be made of the people who are already living in it. So let's see if we can figure out how to have a new configuration emerge from what's already there. And on top of all this other complexity, the situation is personal. The situation is personal, so it's not just what people are doing, it's belief and attitude and identity and connection, the things that we've just seen in these examples, the full depth of human experience. So what's all this made of? If we're thinking like designers, and we're thinking like people who want to engage and intentionally help in a situation, let's talk about what our materials are and what tools we have to work with those materials. And I'll just mention two categories of of materials that aren't digital or physical. And the first is relationships. Social structures, social situations are made of relationships. And this little diagram, silly, messy little diagram, is pulled from a past project of ours. And I'm showing it just to say that, you can try to draw this stuff, and at some point you recognize certain patterns of relationships as something that you give a name to. So this was a family. And, we're used to labeling something a family, and um, that somehow masks for us what's really going on. Calling it a family, like, oh, I know what a family is. But all that web of relationships is more what it's really made of, not just the label family. And of course, the truth is it's more complicated than that, because in any family, it's people participate in lots of relationships at the same time. So the church mom goes to, where everybody works, the school the kids go to, Billy's in a soccer team. All of those things are also just webs of relationships. And all of this is like this communication flowing. There's people coming and going. There's people, having their ego boosted or damaged by what happened at the soccer game. All this stuff is going on. But I think if we bring the relationships to the foreground, we can gain some insight and some understanding there. But it gives us questions as educators and designers and practitioners. What does all those mean? Like, are those relationships open or closed or shallow? Are people caring or feeling isolated? What does it mean for a web of relationships like a family to be healthy? Can we see something in the characteristics of the relationships that would indicate to us health or a certain kind of problem? How would we understand it? Those of you that are practicing ethnographic research, for example, I think this will change our methods and change who's doing it. Can we help the people involved understand their own web of relationships? And once we understand something about health, how do we nurture the growth of healthy relationships? There's a second category of materials, and I'm just calling it people's insides. I've shown in a previous diagram, talking about Project H, this same kind of thing. So, if people buy an iPhone, well, they did something that pleased the business that made it, right? So what they do and say, and if they tell people, hey, this iPhone is great, a lot of design is aimed at what people do and say, what they understand, and yeah, emotion, like I love my iPhone. That kind of stuff that kind of conversation is common in design. But what a social web, a social structure is made of also goes all the way down to people's identity, to people's sense of connection. And I know I've been repeating some of these words, but I think these are really important. This is the material we're working with. So if you're going into design for social innovation, because we're using that phrase, thinking that you're going to make a website that's going to bring the community together, I think you might not be working deeply enough, because the real outcomes are going to be made of relationships and people's insides. So if that's, most of our tools have to do with working with digital and physical materials. If the material of social innovation is relationship and human depth, we need some new tools. We need a way to see the system as a whole, a way to actually get into that mess and really work with it, work inside it, and a way to engage the people who live in it in the act of creation, in the work of creation. And, this stuff doesn't happen in a 3-month project. It's not like about your quarterly outcomes. We need to shift so that we're nurturing the growth of something new and positive from inside these situations over time until we get to, so what's our measure? The measure isn't, we finished the project on time and on budget, or we won the next grant. The measure is, did the more healthy situation, is it resilient? Is it ongoing? Can it just keep itself going? It's the new way the thing is. Right, so we're dealing with this complexity, got materials of relationships and people's insides. We need some tools. And I want to now just talk about two categories of tools. I mentioned that I like tools that start to give me a sense of courage, that I could actually go into some of these situations and make a positive difference. No fooling around, like no bragging. And we've been shifting our business in that direction, and it's a little scary. But these categories of tools are some of the things that are getting us really excited about the direction that we're headed. And one of those categories of tools is transformational experiences. We can learn to create experiences, to guide experiences that help people do these things, that help the people in the situation actually see it from different points of view, through each other's eyes, and set aside judgment and cynicism. And when you do that, you bump into how maybe your own assumptions about the situation don't quite fit the way you thought they did. So it's challenging. You're confronted by your own beliefs not fitting what's really going on. Can we learn to create experiences where people get to the other side of that, so they're open to new possibilities and see themselves as part of creating something new, or the birth of something new? And we have really a lot in our global conversation right now, a lot of focus on what's broken, what needs fixing. Can we identify it? What should we do about it? But boy, is it a surprisingly powerful, simple thing to shift the point of view in the conversation to what's possible, what's really great now, or kind of great, and how can we get more of it, or amplify it, or accelerate it. And we can learn to guide experiences for people where they are together participating in the emergence of something new and healthier together. And the second category of tools, I'm calling open dialogue. I don't know, I can't see you, so I can't see the look in your eye. I don't know if some of this language seems a little new, a little jargony or something for you. Transformational experience is kind of a mouthful and kind of like a new piece of jargon. We don't have good language for this stuff yet, and so I'm making it up. But I'm throwing a bunch of words at you in hope that you're making sense of it. I don't really care what we call it, but there's something important. The bottom part of this slide is taken from a guy, Otto Scharmer, who wrote a book, a very influential and very useful book, Theory U. And so this is a picture of different levels of conversation, or different levels of dialogue. So if relationships are mostly made of conversation, you can just have, we've all seen it, what Scharmer calls downloading. So I'm talking nice. I'm just saying what I think you want to hear. It really means I have no stake. I don't care about this. I'm just trying to get through it. A little deeper, a little more open, maybe still not constructive, is debate, where I'm not just saying what I think you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think. And that's my goal, to make sure I've told you what I think. So it can come across as kind of talking tough. And again, it's not really constructive. Well, how can we get past that to real dialogue, where people see themselves as part of something together, and they're curious about that. They'd like to learn about how everybody sees it. I'm having reflective inquiry is what it says here. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm inquiring. So now the dialogue is about how do you see it? How do you see it? Oh, I learned from it. That's constructive dialogue, and now we can get somewhere. And there's another level that Charmer talks about, and I think a lot of you, whether it's a school project or there's a lot of slices in life where we experience this kind of thing, where it happens that it's not just that we're inquiring about how everybody sees the situation. We have a sense together that something is being born here. Something new wants to happen, and we're all part of it happening. And when creation and collaboration is at its best, you get that sense. And we've left behind downloading and debate and dialogue long past, and now we're making together. And that's transformational. That second sentence there, we can learn to foster conditions in which people participate in this kind of dialogue. That's such a powerful tool. The Americans may know this book, Pollyanna. I'm not being a Pollyanna. It can sound idealistic. Pollyanna is an excessively or blindly optimistic person. I'm being as practical as I can be. Like I say, we're trying to figure out how to actually practice this kind of stuff. But sometimes when I say things like, "Hey, we can get everybody just talking and together constructively," that it can come across sounding idealistic, and I don't mean it that way at all. I mean, we can really do this, and I say that because people are out there doing it every day right now. So our tools are already out there. We've been harvesting mostly from these three areas, from design practice, from the people studying living systems, and from people who are out there already facilitating transformational change. So quickly, what can we harvest from all of this? There's a lot. I'm just kind of summarizing here because we're working on the synthesis of this stuff, but decades of design practice give us this really powerful, the design method, right? The design method, which is powerful to create in so many situations, and it has 3 easy steps. You go inside, you try to understand. You try to make some helpful change, and then you keep repeating because you're going to get it wrong the first time. You know you are, and your understanding is going to be imperfect the first time. But this iterating, and included in that, you iterating by making prototypes. So there's so many ways to make a convincing illusion for people that the future, some possible future, is already here, and we can all pretend together that we're living in it. And you learn so much about what you should make and what it should be like by doing that together. Designers are great at thinking and communicating visually. They take joy in making things and doing it together, and they include human experience in the work that they do. So we have lots of methods, lots of approaches to harvest and bring into this work from the history of design practice. The guys and women out there studying living systems are mostly biologists. So they're confronted with the complexity every day, and they're very serious about how do you understand an ecosystem? What's a model of it? How do you hold it in your head? How do you understand the dynamics? How do you see it in terms of relationship and the invisible, giving birth, sort of yielding the visible? Again, we're just finding some really powerful and useful things. There's some translation needed to map their language and their models to the kind of work we're talking about tonight, but powerful and exciting. And this practice of facilitating transformation, there's guys. I'll show a little list of resources at the end. Just a handful of books and authors where you can get started in some of these areas. But just look at this list. There's people already out there publishing about how they convene groups of people who maybe at first don't want to get together, how they convene groups of people around a common intention, how we've talked about, so we need to facilitate this open dialogue, this creative dialogue. Well, what happens in the room? How do you start it? What's the invitation even? How do you handle difficulty? How do you handle the power dynamics in the room? They can say, well, here's what we've tried, and this seems to work over and over again. And things about nurturing, not working only with direct effects, but working with indirect effects over time. They have a lot to teach us. So from my point of view, it's not figured out yet. There's a lot of wonderful parts on the shelf. There's unbelievably exciting challenges and opportunities, like places we could go try this stuff. So the work is pull as much as we can from what's already on the shelf, what people are already doing, invent where it's necessary, synthesize it into new practice, new ways of seeing, new ways of working, and keep trying it and telling our story. So Project H, as one example, is doing a good job of telling their story. And if they hadn't, I wouldn't be able to tell you about it tonight. And if we're all doing that, then together we are growing a new practice, the practice of intentionally creating healthy living social systems. So join the crowd. Come on, I hope you are. I think your presence tonight says probably you already started. I'm going to stop there and have some discussion. Here's the contact information again. I'll leave this up for just a second, and while we're talking about questions, I'll switch the slide one more time, and it'll show. It's very short, but it's some books, some authors that you can go to, and you can ask Google about them, a place to get started so far as resources. So, hi, Erin. What do we have for discussion?
We've got some great questions, and for anybody else who has questions, please feel free to put them in, and we'll get to them. The first one we have is from Deanna Jurak. She'd like to know if you can give some examples of how you've removed the barrier between us and them and projects. And you should.
Sure. You have to watch, because I can kind of ramble when somebody asks me a question like that. So I'll try to pick one story. For me, the thing is to get people, a lot of our work at Fit Associates is to get people out of their office and out of their particular departments. I don't know if you're, the woman who asked the question, if you're in a corporate situation or not, but so for example, we worked with a client where they had engineers and designers and strategic planners who really spoke very different, they used different lingo, and they had different ideas about what they thought was good, but they were charged together with thinking about a vehicle for China. So rather than give them research reports on China and have meetings about it, we took them there. And the experience of them, it's kind of like what I said earlier about experiences that you see through other people's eyes, and that means you need to kind of maybe change your assumptions. The fact that they all experienced that together changed engineering, planning, and design from a three us-thems with Chinese culture and life as a fourth us-them into one. They really saw themselves as one team that included, they saw the effect that they were having already on China. I know it's kind of a grandiose story, go off to China, but the nut of it is don't talk about it. Go see through each other's eyes, and go first-hand confrontation, first-hand contact and immersion with what you thought was them. And that'll go a long ways to making it an us.
That's perfect. We also have Daniela Vizcayano, and I'm sorry if I just butchered your last name, but what she asks is, as someone with experience in the environmental nonprofit sector, what are your suggestions on how to move beyond the cut and paste frame of mind, where successful project is also often used as a model to apply in other places, where in fact you need to consider social, historic, political, economic, and human values? And I'll publish that so you can all see that.
Yeah, let me read that question.
I know, it's a dense one.
So
the idea of design thinking and the idea of what design is. It's not just a model and a template.
It sounded like a good question. I'm gonna, if I switch to this, oh here, I can read the question now, great. So I should say I don't really have experience in the environmental nonprofit sector. But moving beyond cut and paste frame of mind, which I read cut and paste frame of mind as a very common thing that often people and whole businesses come to any situation with this big suitcase full of things they've done before and that they're good at. And a project is basically rummaging around in there, picking something up that seems like it's going to fit and jamming it into the new situation. I would recommend where one successful project is used as a model of place. So I think that's what you're talking about, right? And really you need to consider social, historical, political. Okay, I understand the question. To avoid giving you too long an answer, I think you might really like this book, Theory U. There's no simplistic answer to this, because all the things that we've talked about tonight, Bertie County or Vietnam, where the change that happened was inside something external to the organization. This business, this environmental nonprofit organization you're talking about, is just like a Vietnamese village or just like Bertie County. It's made of those relationships and presuppositions and old ways of working too. And one thing that Sharma and his colleagues are onto is that ways to bring new questions to that, ways to get people to agree, at least to gather around a different question, and then facilitate an experience. And it might be a day. Sometimes these things are a day. Sometimes these things are much longer, where they personally experience something where they realize that cut and paste is broken. And those factors that you listed, social and historical and political and so on, aren't just words on a page or arguments coming from you trying to persuade them, but it's something they've met face to face. And then it touches them in their guts, and they'll be much more interested in a different conversation. But you got to get them out in the world somehow. We've tried video. We've tried. I know people that have tried acting, role playing, all kinds of things. But I don't think there's really any substitute for them getting out of their cubicles and out into the world. I hope that helps.
So our next question is from Alyssa. She says that she loves your Pollyanna rebuttal, but she has a question about complexity. She's curious to hear your thoughts on the design thinking innovation process and its part in solving problems that are embedded in a system of structural violence.
Dear me.
I know, you were getting some very tough questions.
Well, I'm taking a swing at each one. I'll at least swing at them. Thinking innovation process and its part in solving problems that are embedded in a system of structural violence. I'm just going to say what comes to mind, and then I'm going to stop talking, because these are kinds of questions that we have to explore our way into. This is the big learning. This is the big shift that we're all participating in. This is what I've been talking about. Design thinking and innovation process is typically built around an expert showing up from the outside and figuring out what to do kind of point of view. So usually as you read what people are teaching about innovation and design thinking, they're talking about getting better and better at going into situations and figuring out what's broken and what needs what we can do to reconfigure things as experts and then walk away. And the theme of tonight is, I think for a lot of these situations, something with a embedded system of structural violence, you're not going to show up from the outside and make that better in a project. My colleague grew up in South Africa, which absolutely fits that description. And this is something we talk about quite a bit. I don't have a direct answer for what to do in a system of structural violence, or if that's what you mean by that phrase.
And I think that's fair. I think stating that, there are certain things that are deeper issues that we can't know without being directly involved in them right now.
I'll say I will recommend a guy, Adam Kahane, Kahane. He's up here. The second book in this list, Power and Love. There's a guy that has facilitated in South Africa just after the end of apartheid. He's facilitated in between Palestine and Israel. He was present when, I don't remember if it was Nicaragua or Guatemala, when guerrillas got together with the government and kind of realized, hey, it's us that's making all this violence. So he has some stuff to say, I think, about your question. It's a thin book, very readable.
So we have a bunch more questions. We have one from Julio Salazar, who wants to know what the greatest challenge you have faced when designing a solution, and did you fail or succeed?
Thank you for that question. Greatest challenge. Well, this isn't what you asked, but I'm going to knock a little bit on that phrase, designing a solution. I spent a lot of my career, most of my career, participating in conceiving and designing solutions. And part of what I'm talking about tonight is I'm sort of done with that. Because I think so often, you have this great idea and that's not what ships. Or what it does ship. And it turned out not to be the big solution you thought it was going to be, that the whole company thought it was going to be. It might even make money for the business, but does it improve life? Usually not. And I was talking with another designer here in Pittsburgh who's had a 30-something year career, and we were saying, okay, how many times in your career did what you thought of is actually, what your team conceived is actually what shipped, and what shipped was good for people? And she said 1, and I said 2, both in careers more than 30 years. So this is one of the reasons I'm so excited about this much harder, much more difficult, and much more scary idea of going inside the situation and helping the people involved dance in such a way that something better comes out of it. So I think the greatest challenge has been repeatedly butting my head up against all the organizational forces and dysfunctions that just try to ship the thing they know how to make instead of doing something that actually helps.
So kind of dovetailing right into that, Irene would like to know, how do you get them to participate? Sometimes it's hard for people to open up and collaborate with the us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is something, I know that I am relatively I am relatively new at, which is why I am eating up books. Um, I've got some books stacked over here. I might hold up a couple to the camera in a second, but um, you know, I can only speak from my personal experience, and that is that I've been happiest and most effective in small businesses and small firms. So we didn't need tons of clients or tons of work to keep going. And we decided a long time ago that we weren't interested in missionary work. So we need to work with collaborators, with partners that are already, there's already an opening. It's already a conversation among them that, hey, you know, what we do has an impact on the world, and wouldn't it be nice to improve that? If there's at least that, then, you know, we can get somewhere. I will say that almost any conversation we have about a new project or a new effort or something, often it starts with maybe kind of an us-them, or it starts with a, we've decided we're going to do this. And I try to always ask, you know, to what end? Who's going to use this for what? What difference are you trying to make? And sometimes that kind of causes a pause and reflection in the room, and if you push on it, you can get somewhere. But I'll say, let me hold up a book or two. Here's a book, The Art of Convening, which is partly exactly about your question. How do you get people to open up and collaborate? And here's a book. It's in the list. Engaging Emergence by Peggy Holman. Also touches on your question. I hope that helps.
Some of you are going to get a good jump on the reading list from Mark's class.
Oh, it's going to get longer.
So we have a few more questions. For Kieran, I published some answers and recommended that you check out the website, the programs, advisors, speakers, just so that we can make sure we try to get to everyone in the limited time we have left. And so Maria's question is, and I'll just publish this here, how do you motivate people to immerse themselves in a culture of different experience that could result in a new way of thinking?
You know, I haven't really experienced much problem in the work that we've been doing, getting people interested in leaving their usual day-to-day situation and going out and seeing another slice of the world. And most people can hear we often do kind of a little boot camp or something where we say, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to go into these people's homes and they're, whatever, this is a family living with diabetes, or you're a restaurant buyer, but we're going to a farm. So a little coaching just, and even practice before we go to say, what does it feel like to set aside your judgment, or to set aside your cynicism or what you think you're going to see, and just become a sensor, just become ears and eyes. And it's kind of a game. You can. I haven't really had. I think most people think it's fun. The harder motivation is getting to the other side, where people are actually digesting that honestly and reflecting on it in a way that they allow it to change them.
So we have a question from Reynard, which is, can you give an example of how your background in ethnography has influenced your design vision, and what strategies can non-ethnographic people implement in their own approach to projects or problems?
I will try. Well, you know, I think that design and ethnography, for my definition of design, I have kind of a working definition of design that I made reference to in one of the slides, that it starts with understanding. That if you just start by spewing out things you think would work or would be cool, that's more, it's closer to an artistic process than to a design process. So the ethnography, the ethnography brings a great big bag of tricks, a great big bag of tools to the work of understanding, so that it informs and shapes your design. So that's just, I see them as a completely natural fit. If I'm a designer, I want to be able to understand better. So ethnographic tools, thank you very much. And what strategies can a non-ethnographic person, you know, we say ethnographic, and it sounds like you need to go get a degree in anthropology. And I don't think, I know that we're certainly not doing ethnographies, and I don't know any designers that are doing really what an ethnographer does. We're borrowing methods. So we're learning to ask good questions. We're learning to observe with all our senses turned on. We're learning some of the practicalities of capturing data and how to, so what to do with all those stories when we get home. And I think there's lots of books in the design field that can give you a lot. Kim Goodwin's big fat book, whose title I forget, about design methods, design process, has a lot of good stuff about interview and observation and what to do with that in design. So read that stuff and just start doing it.
And so we have a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. This next one is from Ji Young, who is actually an applicant to the program. Glad you could make it. She wants to know, she has a great interest in social media and social media platforms, and she wants to know, what do you think about a role for social media in design for social innovation?
I'm thinking about what I think about that. It's funny, I mean, so social media and social innovation, they both have that word social in there. Most of the social media, so we're talking, right, Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, all those things, are, I might leave Twitter aside for a second. In their design, what they actually do is as much about the individual. It's as much about me. Facebook it's as much about me as the social, as the connections. But we've seen the really surprising things that Twitter has been used for. I'm sure even to the great surprise of the people that created it. So I'd rather, for me personally, I would rather not focus on the media yet, not get ahead of myself and say, oh, let's use social media here. It creates this wonderful set of possibilities. It's more parts on the shelf. It's tools that can be used. But I don't want to start there. It's just like in any other design. I don't want to start by assuming it's going to be a piece of plastic. I want to understand first, and maybe it's something completely different. I think there's, but they have a lot to teach us about people's urge to connect. We have a lot of issues in our society have to do with fragmentation and isolation. So this groundswell of use of these things says something about that. I don't know that I can do a lot more than ramble about that, except to say that I don't see them as the answer to any particular thing. I see them as a wonderful set of materials to work with, and the rest depends on the situation, what we're trying to do. And actually the last thing I'd say about that is that I get a little frustrated sometimes about what I'd call the Twitter gap or something, because most of the design community is typing away on their laptops and using using Twitter. We're just tweeting up a storm. Most of the planet is not doing that, and doesn't, when they go to the library to fill in their government form, because that's the only place where there's a computer and an internet connection, they have to have someone show them how to type in their social security number. There's a lot of this country and a lot of the world that just is, the social media is so outside the realm of possibility for them that I just don't want to start with it.
Perfect. So Peggy, I'm going to kind of loop your question into that, and I know it doesn't fully answer you, but if you'd like to email Mark or I separately, we can hopefully try and answer that a little better. But just because we already are over a little bit, I'm going to skip ahead to Dina, who says, I see that your company is located in Pittsburgh. Will you be teaching in person or virtually for the SVA program? And I don't know if we have an answer to this fully.
We have aspirations. Definitely at least some in person. And there's it's still a few months till the program begins, so we're working out some possibilities with the schedule that would allow me maybe to be there all of the time for this class. I would much prefer to do it in person, because this is not lecture material, some lecture material, but we got to get you guys out there doing stuff and reflecting on it, and it's got to be hands-on. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It may be that this class shifts from one night a week to a series of intense days, a few days a month. We're playing with lots of ideas like that. I'm not sure, but the hope is to be there in person as much as I can.
Wonderful. And so I am going to make this our last question. This is from Gabriella, and she says, can a person from a developing country be involved in social innovation? And
Can a person from a developing country be involved in social innovation? Oh my. Yes, please. Yes, already are. Most of what's going on is in developing countries. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So much to learn.
I would say that what we're looking for in our class of 25 is not just 25 individuals from the developed world, but we really want a diversity of perspective, both that people from different geographic regions, different skill sets. So it's really about bringing perspective, and I think we talked a lot about the importance of changing your perspective tonight. And what we're really hoping is to have people from, multiple different regions engaging together and sort of opening up each other's perspective by showing how they look at an issue differently. So our hope with that class of 25 is not just that you would be from different skill sets, architecture, engineering, international development, design, but also that you would be from multiple different areas. We've got students who are applying from Africa, Colombia, Mexico, the United States, Canada, India, China. So I definitely think, yes, please, get involved.
Absolutely. The work is less. It's not. This isn't industrial design. You don't have to know how to use a computer. Maybe it helps, but this is our eyes and voices and hands and hearts that we're working with here, and you've got those, or most of those things probably. So, yeah, come on.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you, Mark, so much for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. I had fun.
Good. That's the idea. It should be fun. So applications are still open. So if you're considering applying to the program, definitely reach out. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. All right. Well, have a nice night.
Oh wait, my colleague is still on. Oh wait, I don't know. No, she's not.
Oh my God, everybody I know needs to take this class. Everybody